The meta has been developing incredibly fast in Marvel Rivals, and there are some new compositions and characters that are really frustrating to deal with. So in this video, we're going to break down the meta strats, tell you exactly how you can counter them or alternatives you can play, and give you tips and tricks along the way to dominate in Season 1. Now, a lot of you really loved the Rivals Academy free event last Sunday, so we're going to run it back one more time. Sunday at 3 p.m. CST, I'm going to be breaking down your gameplay and VOD reviews, giving you tips and tricks so you can directly improve. More information will be in the description down below, and I can't wait to see you there, but let's get back into the video. Now, the composition that everyone is talking about right now is triple support. It didn't take people very long to realize just how powerful defensive ults are. They can keep you alive through a ton, whether it's Cloak and Dagger or Luna Snow ult, and with someone like Loki, for instance, you can copy an ult and then do it again, having very long periods of time where you just don't die. Now, while this composition can be extremely strong when played properly, I think a lot of people are forcing this comp, asking for this comp, and generally just playing this comp poorly. So let's talk about some of the problems of that composition and some of the counter things that you can play to shut it down. Now, the first thing that's deceptively true is that triple support can actually be rather difficult to play. It's an inherently reactive composition. You're not trying to take initiative, you're trying to sustain through opponent's initiative a lot of the time, which puts the action on your opponents and you, the realm, to respond to it. And most of the time, when you're the one that isn't taking the initiative, snowballs happen less, getting free fight wins happen less. And it really makes it so that every single fight you win, you're gonna have to invest a lot. You're never gonna get a fight for free at all. And you get fights for free all the time in DPS compositions, multiple DPS compositions, because people push up, get trades, get snowballs, and things like that. But also, it's hard to play because all the support players need to be perfectly in sync. And everyone gets super mad when people double support ult, but it happens more often than any other composition in triple support. And you could say, oh, let's have this person do it first, this person do it second. Let's have open communication. Having that open communication is actually hard. It doesn't happen all that often. Everyone knows that in their games. Most people hardly talk, and if they do, the communication isn't always perfectly in sync. You're not always understanding exactly what your teammates are asking for. And what do you do when something outside the norm happens? Like someone is super aggressive in your back line, you're getting really heavily pushed by a tank or by a DPS and you'll die. You might just pop ults reactively or just die and not pop ults at all. So there's a lot of variability there that if you're playing in like a full stack or like a scrim lobby or something along those lines, then yeah, you can have this built-in communication and really understand how you're supposed to approach every single situation. But when you're just throwing a bunch of random ranked people on triple support, you are gonna mess all of this stuff up. I think triple support requires everyone to play really, really well together and not make these core mistakes. And the other thing that people don't really understand is the scarcity of resources that happens, especially if you're rocking something like triple support and one tank. This composition might be like one of the worst. It's actually really bad and it's really easy to abuse. And here's the reason that this is bad, and this is especially bad when you're not playing a support that gives you supplemental utility like Adam or Loki or even Rocket. And here's the reason why. There is not enough HP for you to mass heal. Like if you have one tank, let's say you have one Magneto, that person is not taking a lot of damage. And if you go up against two tanks with two supports, both of their supports will reach their ultimate when everyone on your team is at like 50%. And if they just ult first, y'all just lose fights. And then in the next fight, when they start comboing ultimates with their one DPS or the two DPS ultimates, you're gonna have to respond and trade out all your support ultimates. And by the time you're done with all that, they're building up more support ults. So it's like you're behind in tempo dramatically. And you can offset that by being aggressive and doing damage and stuff like that, but your damage is never going to be quite as much as a DPS in your slot. You're not going to apply as much pressure with purely your damage, and there's not enough raw healing for you to actually take advantage of the fact that you can generate an ult really fast. Now, this could definitely be offset with certain supports, like I talked about. Supports like Adam Warlock really, I think, are important in a triple support composition, or Loki, or whatever the case may be, providing extra utility outside of the norm of just pumping a ton of heals. I know the other supports do offer a lot, but not quite the same amount of like raw damage specs as someone like Adam. And that's really important because you want to make sure that your supports are not all fighting for that same resource so that they can build their ultimates appropriately. Now, the thing about triple support as well, and the reason that I highly recommend not trying to force this, like you can definitely play it if you have the people on your team that are good at support, but don't be throwing people on other roles into this composition, because the ways to counter it are actually really easy. So number one, Iron Man plus Hulk. Everyone knows just how busted this comp is because Hulk and Iron Man got banned at high level, like consistently, and they still get banned quite a bit, but especially if you're underneath the ban ranks, Iron Man plus Hulk just completely farms triple support for a number of reasons. Number one, Iron Man is going to be more or less uncontested. Not a lot of supports can contest him. Only really Adam Warlock can contest him. And if you have less DPS, there's less angles to challenge the Iron Man, which allows him to do his job a lot easier. And then he can just ult burst through all the support ults. So that's one. Two, a character like Moon Knight gets to farm ultimate actually at a faster rate than a lot of supports can, trade out a crazy amount of damage that chains together, and build an ultimate that supports can't survive through. So he's another extremely strong character against something like triple support. And one of the weaknesses to Moon Knight is characters that are specifically targeting him. So it's mostly about the fact that supports can't apply pressure, and that's the big thing. They can't go and chase a Moon Knight down on the high ground that's just constantly free aiming, free shooting, free dealing damage. But, you know, Psylocke can, and freaking even Black Panthers can, and Star-Lords can, and a lot of DPS can, and even some tanks can, but triple support cannot. And that's the weakness of this composition. And a lot of people are acting like it has none. It definitely does. Another super strong character against this is Hawkeye. I know Hawkeye does get banned quite a bit at high elos, but in elos that he's not banned, Hawkeye just gets to free fire. Once again, it's a character that if you do not directly contest him, he just gets to shoot and shoot and shoot, and eventually he kills somebody, right? He just gets to kill people for free. And honestly, Hawkeye is actually escaping bans at high elo a lot more, but he's a great character to punish a lot of these triple support compositions, because who cares about ults when, you know, every 5th shot you kill somebody? I mean, that's as simple as it is. Now, of course, we have some of the more obvious combos like Groot plus Moon Knight, which is just a kill combo through defensive ultimates. And if you just generate this every single fight, you just Groot ult everyone together, then you Moon Knight ult them, they're just gonna die, they're just gonna fall over. You can even do something similar to this with Namor ultimate as well, depending on the support ultimates. But having a combo of ultimates that can guarantee win you a fight at certain core checkpoints is extremely powerful and one of the strongest duos I could recommend. But the list of counters doesn't stop there. We also got to talk about characters like Wolverine that can legitimately just pull tanks way out of position to a point where supports can't really keep them alive or keep them up, and then they just basically get a tank deleted. They just take a tank way out of position, get that tank killed, and yeah, supports are just kind of left there, you know, hoping and praying, because that is a super powerful way to interact with the fight that, you know, supports can't necessarily stop. Invisible Woman does have quite a bit of counterplay into that, but I actually don't even think she is one of the strongest supports in the triple support composition. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, to round that out, we also got to talk about Magneto, a character that is actually seeing probably just as much, if not more, play than Doctor Strange right now, mainly because Magneto is great at dealing with Cloak and Dagger, and specifically Cloak and Dagger. She's super easy for you to shut down when you're playing Magneto because she pops her ultimate, you pop yours. And if you absorb a little bit of damage, you can actually do it when she does her second dash and then pauses and you just kill her. Or if you don't absorb any damage, you can do it on the third dash. And yeah, you can pretty much do this every single time. Cancel, Cloak ult, and kill her. And yeah, I mean, Cloaks are getting really kind of crafty with how they're using their ultimate now. Using it high up in the air, kind of floating away, getting out of the fight. But yeah, it is undoubtedly a really strong counter to the ultimate and the composition. And yeah, we're seeing some anti-meta stuff with like Magneto saving their bubble specifically for their Cloak and Dagger to counter the enemy Magneto. Well, you get the picture. Now, the last character I want to talk about in the strong versus triple support is actually Squirrel Girl. And you might not think this because you're like, oh, spam, they're just gonna get their ultimate super fast. But the amount of pressure you put on them when you're rocking a Squirrel Girl, especially on maps like the Tokyo map on the first point, it's almost too much to overcome. You're really just applying so much crazy pressure. Everyone's really grouped up in this triple support composition, playing close together. No one is also combating you. One of the things similar to Moon Knight's weakness, Squirrel Girl doesn't want to fight people necessarily that are after her. She wants to set up and just kind of just exist and output damage, and you are going to output crazy damage and actually oftentimes beat supports to their ultimate. With Squirrel Girl, pop your ultimate's actually way better now. You can just literally snowball fights like crazy. And then in some situations, if you combine it with other ults, you can really even kill through support ultimates as well. Like, Squirrel Girl is amazingly strong, and these are just some of the characters that are really good against triple support. So if you think, hey, just play triple support and you win, it's not true. Not true at all. In fact, fact, I think a lot of these counter characters are actually easier to run effective anti-triple support strategies than it is to actually run triple support in ranked. Now that we've gotten away from the triple support composition, let's actually talk about some meta outliers and ways that you can deal with them in your games and, you know, actually win still. The first one we got to talk about is flying heroes, so specifically Storm and Iron Man. And I do understand that these characters are banned a lot, but I also want to talk about people that can't ban them or when they get through the cracks of banning. How do you deal with flying heroes? What is the core objectives? How should you interact with them if you can't directly interact with them? What do you do? So the first thing I want to talk about, and a lot of people ask me, is can you play like a dive character that can't deal with these characters against them? Like, can I play Black Panther against them? Can I play this character against them that just dives in? And I always like to say you could be a threat or an answer. Like, you could be one or the other. You don't have to be both. You could just pick one and still get a lot of value. So if you're a Black Panther that is going in and killing their supports every single fight, it literally doesn't matter that you can't shoot the Iron Man or you can't shoot the Storm. Like, that doesn't matter because they don't have the resources to keep their composition alive, their tanks alive, and they aren't getting any healing as well. So now they're in an awkward situation where they either need to kill more than you, be a bigger threat than you, or they need to try to play to stop you. But if they can't stop you, then you're still just kind of rolling through. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't swap. I'm saying that you might not have to swap depending on if you're a big enough threat. Like, you don't have to swap up what you're doing to directly deal with something unless that thing is a bigger threat than you are and doing a lot more than you are. Then it's like almost demanded that you play something that can answer instead, because otherwise, you know, if they're wiping your team over and over and over again and you're only getting like a pick every fourth engage, then yeah, you're not going to actually be able to win that game, right? Now, the other thing that's super important is actually just communicate location, communicate where, especially with pings. Iron Man and even Storm to an extent get kills so freaking fast if people lose their position. Like, if Iron Man has the Hulk team up, he's just gonna beam someone and they're gonna die before they even realize like what's going on. But if they know where he is, they can position in a way, or they can be ready to deal damage in a way that prevents that Iron Man from setting up in those positions. And it's a similar thing to Storm. So communication is really important here, and these characters have the ability to kind of slip in. They're almost like glass cannons in a way, where they can be and put themselves in like riskier positions where it's like out in the open, but if they're there and they have that window where they can just like instantly kill somebody and then instantly kill someone else, and it's like too late. You already lost the fight because no one communicated, even though they were actually vulnerable. The second they kind of moved into that location, if they would have taken some damage or people knew they were there, it wouldn't have been possible. Now, if you opt to play a counter or something that deals with these characters, it's your job to enable your direct counters to these characters. And what do I mean by that? So if you have like a Hela, or if you have like a Star-Lord, or you have a freaking Punisher, any of these characters, you need to do whatever you can to help those players get into positions that help them contest and survive trading damage in those positions. So like, if you have a Hela that is peeking out super wide, right, and she gets like walked on by a tank and there's nothing that responds to that, then you didn't create enough space for your Hela to hold that angle and like deny that Iron Man. And if you're a support, you can be pocketing that Hela, because let's say the Hela does a little damage to the Iron Man does a little bit of damage to her, and then you trade back and forth, and then your Hela dies. Now the Iron Man gets healed up, he's gonna wrap around, and he's gonna kill your whole team because he got nothing to contest him. So you gotta understand that like, the little bit of healing that your tank needs, the little bit of healing that your other random Iron Fist needs, or whatever, whoever it is, they don't matter in that moment. What matters is the person that can contest the thing that if left uncontested can kill your team. I talk a lot about win conditions in fights, but like, their win condition is dealing with the threats. And I talk about that a lot in my DPS video, where it's like, if you are playing certain characters, once the threat is gone, you're much more free to like fly in the sky and kind of play skybox, play range. No one can touch you. You could be a lot more liberal with your position. You could be a lot more aggressive with your position. That's exactly what you want to prevent as a tank and a support and even a DPS in your games. Like, you want to make sure that the Hela is also not being forced to constantly duel a Psylocke. So if you're the other DPS, you're going to keep that Psylocke off the Hela, because that is not what you want her focused on. And if you're the Hela, you understand that this is your primary priority, so don't get too caught up and distracted with other things that don't make it so you're accomplishing your core goal. Now, we mentioned him earlier, but this next character is warping games around him completely, and it's Wolverine, a character that we all thought was pretty bad at the start, and then we slowly find out he's actually busted, and then he got buffed and he's even more busted. And this character is a problem because he can just delete tanks over and over again, and a really good Wolverine can't be stopped. It doesn't really matter if you're playing Magneto. I know Magneto has a lot more counterplay, but it's a lot harder. Groots get farmed, Stranges get farmed, and if the Wolverine gets the right amount of resources, he's going to delete a tank every single fight, which means you're probably going to lose, like, every single fight over and over and over again. And if this is not happening to you, I promise you it will. As you climb, you will run into a Wolverine that does this to you over and over and over again. So what do you do? How do you stop him? How do you stop your tank from dying? How do you live as a tank yourself? How do you win against these god tier Wolverines? Now, the first thing is you have to call out his setups. Like, a Wolverine is going to be typically waiting on the high ground, waiting for a tank to walk forward, and he's going to drop, he's going to scoop up your tank, and then he's going to die, right? So, scouting the area, especially if you're a DPS player, this is your job. Scout the area, find where the Wolverine is, force the Wolverine in a fight with you. Don't allow that Wolverine to take a fight with your tank. Force him to fight you, because in a fight, he's actually at a disadvantage against squishies comparatively to tanks. You want him to focus on you all the time. So if you can force that, that's a dub. That's actually a good thing. It's a good trade overall for your team. He's not taking your tank. He's not killing your tank. That's amazing. The other thing is, in general, the #1 counter to Wolverine is Invisible Woman. We went over this in the Wolverine guide with Team Captain. The pull will yank people out of his grip, and on top of that, the Vortex doesn't even let the Wolverine jump at all, and if he jumps into it, it will drop the person. So if the Wolverine comes to your tank, you throw the Vortex on your own tank, you pop it, because you can pop it midair, and now the Wolverine is just standing there, and then you make sure to constantly deal damage to him over and over again. Typically, you want to cycle both. So you pull the Vortex, the Wolverine's going to do a funky dance and kind of wait it out. Then he's going to try to pull, then you pull him. So you just shut him completely down. And another super important aspect of this is calling out when Wolverine doesn't have his passive. When he has his passive, it's super important that you trigger it as soon as you can. It dramatically lowers his overall HP. It makes it so he has to go for a lot riskier plays, or he's going to be out of the fight for a much longer time. And then when he doesn't have it and he has it, it's something that's really, really important to coordinate to your team, because it can change how your DPS duels them. Like, if a DPS chases them down, if he has the passive, the Wolverine could turn the tables on them. If he doesn't, they could go all in and kill them. But if they use that last ability and they have the passive, they'll just die. So you really got to communicate this stuff. It's really important. But I really hope you learned something in this video about how to counter some of the meta strategies and characters. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below, and make sure to check out the Marvel Rivals Academy. Free class this Sunday, and I really hope to see you there. But anyways, I'll see you next time.